Rain fell hard against the old wooden roof of the Dawson barn, its rhythm echoing the storm inside Clara Dawson's heart. She stood at the edge of her family's failing farm, watching the muddy fields that once fed their dreams. Her father's debts had buried them deep, deeper than she could dig them out. The bank had already taken half the land, and the rest was on borrowed time. In the small town of Bridle Creek, word traveled faster than the wind, and every whisper stung like a lash. That poor Dawson girl, they said. Her father left her nothing but bills and bad luck. Some went further. She's a burden. Should have sold that land and left. Clara tried not to listen, but words like that stuck. At 24, she'd worked from dawn to dusk just to keep the lights on. The horses had been sold, the barn half empty, and the crops were barely surviving. She'd stopped dreaming about anything more than a roof over her head. Every morning she walked to the local diner, serving coffee to the same people who gossiped about her, and still smiled like it didn't hurt. But that day was different. A stranger had walked into the diner, a man built like the mountains, quiet as the plains. He had the calm presence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. His name was Luke Carson, the richest rancher in the county. Rumor said he owned half of Bridle Creek, though no one knew much about his personal life. He rarely came to town, but when he did, people noticed. Clara saw him sit alone at the corner booth. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes, his jacket soaked from the rain. She approached with her notepad and her practiced smile. "Coffee?" she asked softly. He nodded, his deep voice low and steady. "Black. And maybe a piece of that pecan pie." As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "You're a Dawson, aren't you?" The words froze her. "Yes, sir. My family's farm is just west of town." He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I used to know your father. Good man. Shame what happened." She lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "Yes, sir. We're still trying to keep it going." He didn't say more, but his gaze lingered. That evening, as she closed the diner, she found Luke waiting by his truck. "You shouldn't walk home in this rain," he said simply. She hesitated, pride flickering in her chest. "I've walked in worse, Mr. Carson." He tilted his hat. "Call me Luke. And come on. I don't bite." Something about his calmness disarmed her. Against her better judgment, she accepted the ride. The truck was silent except for the hum of the engine and the patter of rain. "You don't owe me anything," he said suddenly, reading her tension. "I know how people in this town talk." She looked out the window, her voice quiet. "They call me a burden. I'm just the girl with too much debt and no way out." Luke's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "They called me worse when I first came here," he said. "Said I'd never build a ranch worth anything. Sometimes people hate what they don't understand." She looked at him, surprised. "You. But you're rich." He finished, a hint of dry humor in his voice. "That came later. Back then, I was just another man trying to survive." The drive ended at her farmhouse. Before she got out, he looked her in the eyes. "Don't let them break you, Clara. You've got more fight in you than they do gossip." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, Luke." She didn't expect to see him again. But she was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Luke started showing up at the diner. Sometimes he'd just sit quietly in his corner booth, sipping coffee. Other times, he'd ask about the farm, offering small bits of advice about soil or livestock. "You ever think about leasing part of your land?" he asked once. "You could make a little steady money." She shook her head. "I can't even afford to fence it properly, let alone fix the barn roof. The bank will take it soon anyway." That word, bank, made his jaw tighten. "Which one?" he asked. "The same one that almost took my ranch 10 years ago." She sighed. "Bridle Creek credit. My father owed them, and I can't pay off what's left." That night, after she locked up, she found a brown envelope slipped under the diner's back door. Inside was a check, enough to clear every debt her family owed. No name. No note. Just a check. Her hands trembled as she read the amount. It had to be Luke. But why? She ran to his ranch the next morning, anger and confusion in her chest. He was out near the corral, working with a restless stallion. She didn't care who was watching. You can't do this, she shouted, holding the check out. I didn't ask for your charity. Luke turned slowly, wiping his hands. His eyes were calm but serious. It's not charity, he said. It's an investment. In me, she scoffed. You don't even know me. He stepped closer, his voice low. I know enough. I've watched you fight for land everyone else gave up on. I see how hard you work, how you don't complain. That's worth more than money. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. But I can't pay you back. I'm not asking for money, he said gently. Just promise me you won't give up. The town didn't take kindly to news of Luke helping her. Gossip grew nastier. He's just pitying her, they said. Or worse, buying her attention. Clara ignored it as best she could. But it hurt. She worked harder than ever, determined to prove everyone wrong. Weeks turned into months, and with Luke's quiet support, her farm began to breathe again. He sent workers to help repair the barn, refused her payment, and even brought over a few horses from his ranch to help till the fields. Sometimes he stayed for supper, sitting across from her at the worn kitchen table, the silence between them strangely comfortable. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Luke rode up with a folded document in his hand. You've been doing good work, Clara, he said softly. I wanted to see you succeed, but I also wanted to
make sure you knew what you're worth. She frowned, confused. What do you mean? He unfolded the paper and placed it on the table. It was a deed, the title to his land. She froze. Luke, what is this? He smiled faintly, his eyes full of warmth and something deeper. You once said you were a burden because of debt. I want you to understand. People like you are the reason this land still means something. You've got heart, grit, and decency. I've got more land than I'll ever use. This, he tapped the paper, isn't charity. It's a thank you for reminding me what hard work and kindness look like. Tears welled in her eyes. I can't take this, she whispered. He shook his head. You already earned it. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. For years she'd been told she was nothing, that her name carried shame. And here stood a man who saw her differently, not as a burden, but as someone worth believing in. She hugged him, crying softly against his chest. You changed my life, Luke Carson. He held her close, murmuring, No, Clara. You changed your own. I just helped you see it. Months later, the Dawson farm thrived again, fields blooming, horses running free. Clara's name became one of respect, not pity. The same people who'd called her a burden now greeted her with smiles. Luke still visited, sometimes helping fix a fence, sometimes just sitting on the porch with coffee and quiet conversation. And one golden evening, as the sky turned to fire, he reached for her hand. Clara, he said softly, you've got more strength than any man I've met. But even the strongest needs someone to share the load. What do you say we make this land ours, together? Her eyes filled again, but this time with joy. I say yes. From burden to beloved, from debt to destiny, Clara's story became one the whole town remembered. And for every heart watching her journey unfold, she became a symbol of hope. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes in your worth when the world calls you worthless. Moral, never let the world's opinion define your value. Your struggle today might be the reason someone hands you your future tomorrow.